talking about the present flaws. The present flaws in the urban planning. The present urban planning focuses more on the physical planning alone. And as there is focus more on the physical planning, without active contribution, without actively planning for social dimension, environmental dimension, there are certain flaws in the planning. So I can have a context key, how is the present planning and how is present planning actually not very sustainable. Then I can show in the diagram what do you mean by the components of the sustainable urban planning. तो urban planning, sustainable urban planning है क्या? तो अभी की planning कैसी है? Physical planning है. Sustainable planning का क्या मतलब है? Sustainable planning means you use ICT for the environmental problems. You have the environmental dimension, the social dimension, not only the physical dimension, but also the social dimension. And then how sustainable planning will actually solve many problems with respect to the traffic congestion, to pollution, to your social conflicts, to being pressure on the resources. How can the sustainable development planning solve many of these issues, and what can be done? What steps have been taken by the world in India for sustainable development planning? तो flow ऐसा हो सकता है कि अभी planning कैसी है, sustainable development का क्या मतलब है, sustainable planning कैसे help करेगी to tackle the present day problems that we see in the urban areas, and what steps have been taken for that. So when I say sustainable, it is not just about tackling disaster. It is also about sustainable exploitation of the resources. It is also about the efficient mode of transportation, the electric vehicles, the public transport. It is also about sustainable financial management. ये कहीं सुने हैं ये principles? Creating a sense of place, sustainable financial management, the new philosophy, the अभी जो हमारी new urban philosophy है, that actually talks about sustainable planning. Yes. So these are all the principles of the new urban policy, the 10 to 14 principles. So you can use them. This thing also. So what are the components of sustainable planning? It is about the resources, food, biosphere resources. It is about decarbonization and energy. It is about sustainable production, sustainable consumption. It also takes into account the planning for human capital and demography. It uses your ICT. There is digital revolution. We talk about smart cities, the principle of 4-5 principle of the cities, the principle of sustainability, principle of resilience, principle of clean city, principle of the smart city. Okay? So these all are the principles. The reference can also be the National Urban Policy Framework. There are 10 philosophical principles. You can incorporate them in your answers. Okay. Abhi, there is a new kind of urbanization that Saudi Arabia. Have you heard about the line? That is also there in news. You can also use such references in your answers. So about the introduction, you can say that how is the present planning? The present planning is reactive, and the present planning focuses on the development of roads, highways, flyovers. That is the abhi wala jo planning hai, that is more of the physical planning. It is more about land use planning, the commercial planning versus the residential planning. Kahan residential activities rakhe, kahan urban activities rakhe, kahan pe aapka commercial activities rakhe. So present day planning, if you take into consideration, it focuses on the development of roads and the flyovers. It is more about the legality issues between the residential areas and the commercial areas. It is more about planning for physical development. However, even if you, no matter, आपने आज माइग्रेशन हुआ, आपने आज रोड वाइड कर दिए, हमने कितनी बार हमारे रोड्स वाइड किए, क्या अभी भी ट्रैफिक का प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व हो गया? The idea is when you plan only for physical aspect, it is only reactive. सिर्फ आप react कर रहे हो present problem को, आप sustainably tackle नहीं कर रहे हो problem को, you are just having reactive policies. So it is about reactive. The present policy is reactive. We need to have the idea of sustainable development. What is the idea of sustainable development that we have already tackled? It is not simply about environment. It is not simply about resources. It is also about the human dimension, the cultural dimension, human capital dimension. It is also about कि क्या आगे problems होगी उसको tackle करना है with the use of your ICT. तो ये सब आपके इसमें आना चाहिए. Try to use the philosophy, the 10 principle. Try to use these models, the grid planning model, garden city, TOD. ये सब key terms हैं. तो क्या key terms होंगे ताकि आपका answer optional answer लगे? One is the case study. You could have written about the line if you know. अब application mode पे जाना है, and you also need to use the terms that you generally use for your optional papers. Response city का एक example हो सकता है, the line का example हो सकता है, TOD model. You can talk about garden cities. You know what is a garden city? Garden city is basically, when we say garden city, around the urban areas, there was entire green belts that were there, entire forest. ये especially आपका Britain में use हुआ था, in your Great Britain. The cities like Birmingham, your Bristol, Oxford, because what was happening when there was a lot of urbanization that was happening in Britain, the urbanization in Britain was also accompanied with the problems like pollution, congestion, and because industrial revolution का time था, urbanization हो रहा था, और इनको black countries भी कहते थे, black cities, इतना ज़्यादा pollution था, तो इसको और आपका urbanization बहुत rapid pace पे हो रहा था, तो sprawl की problem भी हो रही थी, there was sprawling that was happening, the expansion that is not planned. So to stop this sprawl, what was taken is that on the boundaries of the cities, there was forest. So it was basically to garden city bolte the, the entire forest is around the city. So it was called as a garden city. The concept was given by Ebenezer Howard, and ye bhi concept aap use kar sakte ho. You can use TOD, you can use the concept of garden cities. You can talk about the sponge city. You know about grid planning, Chandigarh model. There have been, the city has been planned into the basis of the grid. What does grid planning do? Grid planning aims at better transportation, better mobility, and therefore there are no issues of traffic and congestions. So I hope you have addressed this question. This was a fairly easy question. There are few case studies in the PDF that we will share. The case studies, these are your smart city based case studies. जो हमारे यहाँ पे इंडिया में जो स्मार्ट सिटी हो रही है, स्मार्ट सिटीज के लिए कुछ कुछ केस स्टडीज हैं, लाइक योर सूरत, त्रिपुरा में अगरतला, अगरतला में बायोडाइवर्सिटी हब्स आर बीइंग डेवलप्ड. ओके, सो लोकल एम्प्लॉयमेंट, अगर आप सूरत में भी देखेंगे तो लोकल यूज ऑफ रिसोर्सेज हो रहा है. सो केस स्टडी लाइक सूरत, द वेस्टलैंड दे आर कन्वर्टिंग इनटू द बायोडाइवर्सिटी हब्स. This is also your green spawn cities जैसा ही concept है, green planning, biodiversity hub बना रहे हैं, especially on the wasteland. There is also a case study for your agroclimatic planning. Those who know agroclimatic planning, basically grow that crops which are suitable to that climate. So agroclimatic planning is happening in your Agartala Smart City Limited. So there are few case studies that have been given. These are your, we will share the document. These are your case studies with respect to India. So हम कौन सी केस स्टडीज यूज कर सकते थे? हम इंडिया की केस स्टडी यूज कर सकते हैं. Now I know some of you know about the line. How many of you have written about it? The line, Saudi Arabia, the line, NEOM, the NEOM. अच्छा, दूसरे में लिखा है, ठीक है, then that's fine. At least apply करो. वो TOD मॉडल पे ही डेवलप्ड हो रहा है along the transportation line. It says new urbanism, TOD, and it says, हाँ ठीक है, मतलब at least पता है तो you can use it as an example here or even somewhere else. It says that 40% of the world can be, you can cover 40% of the world within 6 hours. क्योंकि major centers को cover करेगा. So rimland का भी concept है उसमें. If you look at NEOM, the rimland concept is also there because 40% of the world can actually be visited in 6 hours. The major places. That is the concept of NEOM. Yes, NEOM project. Saudi Arabia से, हाँ, Saudi Arabia भी develop कर रहा है, और even ऐसा similar एक line है जो UAE भी कर रहा है develop. So basically NEOM project Saudi Arabia वाला है. Yes. So वहाँ पे if you look at the video, it says 40% of the world can be reached within 6 hours. That was one of the fascinating fact that actually would the cities, the major cities, rimland को भी connect करेगा, तो आप connect कर सकते हो within this. That's what it says. Renewable energy है, vertical garden है, TOD है. That is the whole concept of it. So that is the idea. Now, this was about the sustainable development. Planning for the sustainable development is important for the cities.